Tell me, what was it like living during the Depression?
As just a young boy of my age, I didn't see much of the effects of it, or at least I went to bed at night with my belly full, and my mom would have nice warm covers, and if I had to get outside, we had pretty good coats, but the overshoes were something else. I mean, your feet really got cold. My first year walking that 2 miles from the ranch to the Upper North Fork School, I would just nearly freeze to death. The teacher set me up by the stove till noon, let me thaw out. Oh, it was terrible. My mom wouldn't let me go to school if it was colder than 20 below. My own kids, when I was teaching and they were going to school up here, you know, they'd complain about something. I said, you guys ought to have lived when I did. I had to walk that 2 miles to school. Well, they really embellished it, and they said, yeah, it was uphill all the way there and all the way back. The things that you didn't have that we take for granted now, that would protect you from the cold and all of that, you know. There weren't any fresh vegetables in the wintertime. It was just the things that we take for granted now. You didn't take them for granted then because they just weren't there. And I felt particularly bad for my mother and dad because in our ranch house we had no running water. And in fact, in the wintertime when they turned the ditch off, there was no fresh water of any kind. All had to be hauled in cream cans. The treat of getting to come to town. Boy, I mean, we only came to town 2 or 3 or 4 times a year. It was about 5 miles from town to where my folks lived, out on North Fork. 5 miles by road. And so, and you know, well, gasoline was real cheap, 10 to 15 cents a gallon. And the old Model A's didn't use very much gas, but still it cost money. So we just didn't come to town very often, and besides that, I'd just be awestruck. Just like the first time I walked in New York City, to come into town was really something. And the kids that went to town school, boy, when I was in the 5th grade, my teacher, Agnes Bedeker, taught with me right up here at these schools, but she was my 5th grade teacher. She was about 19 years old at the time, good-looking gal, and Ralph was courting her. Yeah. But she brought me into the spelling bee the year I was in the 5th grade. Boy, and we got to go into the old school that used to be up there that's gone now. Anyway, I was just awestruck. Great big school buildings, because I'd been going to a one-room country school, you know. So, just the fact that things were so much bigger and kind of so much more complex, that was hard for me to kind of figure out. When you came to town also, I think Mom would either just give me a nickel or would buy some kind of penny candy. And that's what us kids got, was a little bit of candy when it came to town. There was very little social mingling except for the country dances, and they were held about 2 miles from our ranch house. Milford Grange Hall was a kind of a central place for the community to get together. The vacations and the times when you kind of celebrated Thanksgiving and Christmas and so on, everybody up and down the creek, they would call on their phones and all decide who was going to take what. But normally it was like a whole full-blown dinner for Thanksgiving, the turkey and everything. But they would all get together, and Stub Farlow, who was by then retired from his bronc busting and so on, but he had a kind of a band, and he played the banjo. And, oh man, I really liked that. But he would his band would come out to the Grange Hall, and then they'd have this dance. And so I'd sit up on the stage right there and watch him play that banjo. Just, I mean, it's out of this world. But the men, they would get to dancing and drinking and fighting. And so they'd go around behind the back of the dance hall and get in these fights. I must have just stumbled into it, going out behind the dance hall and seeing coins there on the ground where these guys have been fighting, you know. So thereafter, whenever there was a big dance, and of course there'd be some big fights, I'd ask my mom, can I go down to the Grange Hall and look for money? So she'd allow me. And I'd walk that 2 miles down and search all around. Man, I tell you, that was really an experience for me, because one time I found, I think, if I remember correctly, it was $6, and 3 of it was the big silver dollars. Oh boy. Oh boy. So I'd pick them all up, and then I'd take them home to Mom and give them to her. Well, she was thankful, because she didn't have all that kind of money, you know. Dad got the paycheck, but she paid all the bills. She knew where the money was going and so on. The only money that she made during the early 30s, I've forgotten who it was running Brooks Lake Lodge. But because Mom had worked there and they all kind of knew each other yet, they would, it was Foster Scott, great guy. Foster Scott was running it. And he'd send word down to Mom. Well, evidently they'd kind of set it up so Mom would order all these baby chicks. So she'd have like 100, 150 frying chickens. So then when the dudes started coming and the chicks were up good fryer size, he'd send word down, can you send up about 25 chickens? So that was our job for about a couple of days, was to kill chickens and pick them and clean them, and they were all ready to just put in the frying pan. But Mom would do all of that. But from that, I don't know how much she got, maybe $1, $1.50 a piece, but that was her money then to spend. There just wasn't very much money, and of course there wasn't very much that you could buy. It's not like today, when you can go in and buy any kind of Chinese stuff. Any kind, you know? Yeah. People are sure gonna be, they're gonna be saddened, I guess, that they won't be able to go in these stores and buy all this just stuff, junk, that goes to the landfill after about 1 year or less. So then the next year they have to buy more stuff. The American people have just gotten completely spoiled.